Of course, we begin here at home with politics as the presidency dismisses as false and baseless allegations that Nigeria is sliding into a one-party state. This is following a wave of defections to the ruling All Progressives Congress. In a statement, Special Advisor to the President on Information and Strategy, Bayo Onanuga, said the country's democracy remains strong and thriving under President Bola Tinubu. He described claims by opposition politicians and activists as hypocritical, accusing them of trying to delegitimize the choices of Nigerians who have freely decided to support the ruling party, APC. The presidency also defended the recent defections by key opposition figures, saying freedom of association is a fundamental part of democracy and denied any use of blackmail, bribery, or coercion. Blaming the opposition's woes on what it called their poor organization, indiscipline, and failure to manage their internal affairs, the statement insisted that it is not the president's responsibility to strengthen opposition parties. Well, in a rare intervention, the governor of Lagos State, Babajide Sanwo-Olu, yesterday took on the presidential candidate of the Labour Party in the 2023 general election, Peter Obi, claiming the former Anambra State governor lacks the moral right to talk about poverty in Nigeria. In a statement, he personally signed titled, and I quote, factually addressing Mr. Peter Obi's criticism of Nigeria at Johns Hopkins University. Sanwo-Olu accused Obi of contributing to the current poverty in the country and alleged that under him as governor in Anambra State, the menace grew astronomically. During his remarks at Johns Hopkins University, Obi had drawn a comparison between Nigeria, China, and Vietnam in the area of poverty, stressing that Nigeria, with about 50 million poor people, had the least number of people in poverty in 1990 than any of the three countries. But Sanwo-Olu said Obi not only demarketed Nigeria by openly denigrating the country abroad, but also made statements that he had no moral standing to make these statements. Now to the economy, where the Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, NASIMA, and the Organized Private Sector of Nigeria have expressed concern over the World Bank's projection that Nigeria's poverty rate could soar to 56% by 2027, calling for urgent, decisive and coordinated action to reverse the trend. According to the World Bank, 104 million Nigerians, that's about 47% of the population, were living below the poverty line in 2023, up from 40% in 2018. In its latest report, the World Bank predicted that poverty will continue to rise in the coming years, potentially reaching 56% by 2027. The report cited sluggish economic growth, high inflation, and rising rural-urban disparities as key drivers of the trend. Reacting to the report, NASIMA President Dele Calvin Oye Esquire, however, outlined a 13-point short-term measures agenda to halt and reverse the projected rise in poverty. These include targeted economic stimulus packages, greater investment in agriculture, expanded access to credit and microfinance, and supportive and predictable tax environment and robust vocational training programs for unemployed youth and women, amongst others. All right, several issues to unpack there. From politics to the economy, we have a little bit of everything to dissect this Monday morning. Okay,
yesterday, the presidency issued a statement signed by Mr. Bayo Onanuga to say that contrary to what everybody has been saying, or what most people have been saying, don't let me say everybody, that democracy is not under threat. That if anything, the fact that members of the opposition, with the dramatic, seismic, let me quote my this day editor, transformation of persons in data state, elected officials into the fold of the All Progressives Congress, shows that opposition parties are not doing well, that they are not, holding their own people, and that it is a testament to the ability of President Bola Tinubu to promote democracy and to make the APC a very attractive proposition for Nigerian politicians. Mr. Onanuga also made a point in response to the argument about one-party state. He argued that, in fact, the grand coalition that, certain opposition figures have been planning, that grand coalition has failed to gain traction, and that nobody should be surprised that people are moving into the All Progressives Congress. He argued further in that statement that neither President Tinubu nor the APC is trying to create a one-party state. That politicians, human beings, citizens of Nigeria have the rights to the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. He mentioned another freedom, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of association, Section 40 of the 1999 Constitution, Section 39 of the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria. And he said that, look, people are free to express themselves. Now, he says that the opposition, they are poorly organized. In any case, let me summarize by saying that, look, this is the presidency coming out frontally to respond. This is a case of the presidency saying, look, it's not peculiar to Nigeria. In other parts of the world, politicians move from one tendency to the other. However, the problem we have here is that Nigeria is not the same political arrangement as what you have in other parts of the world. Mr. Ononuga may have written a very brilliant piece, very abusive, professionally abusive. I could have written even worse myself at the time I was in that position. But what we're saying, that look, these politicians who are jumping from one place to the other, they are not doing so out of belief, out of ideology. They're doing so for selfish reasons, for purposes of selfish survival. Mr. Ononuga did not address that. And I think that's a very important point that people are talking about. Number two, people are saying that the politics of 2027 has started. And many of these politicians, they are just trying to reposition themselves. It's not the same as Nigel Farage, leaving the Conservative Party. Nigel Farage will do so for for ideological reasons. What is the ideological reason that all these people who are porting, to use a common phrase in Nigeria, to the other? What is it? The second thing is about the rule of law. The Constitution, Section 109, 1G, Section 68, says that if you are a lawmaker and you port from one political party to the other, except as established in Abegunde versus Ondo State House of Assembly, there is clear explanation of division within your party. You are not allowed to deport. If you deport and you say you have the right to do so, you lose your seat. The Abegunde case was a Labour Party case, Ondo State House of Assembly. So all these lawmakers in Delta State who have jumped from one place to the other, what is going to happen to them? All the lawmakers in Rivers State, we have been dealing with that controversy. In Osun State, Honorable Wole Oye has also jumped from a House of Reps to the other. There's something, that should be about morality also, not just law, also about morality. The character of the people in politics in Nigeria, as Chief Dan Ulasi, who was a recent guest on the same program. You and I interviewed him. So what is the moral fiber of their character? But in any case, Mr. Ononuga has done his job. And he has written a very robust, abusing people, failed politicians, desperate emergency defenders of democracy. For us to defend this democracy, the point must be made that we must respect the rule of law, and the law must be tested. Now, you had 3 topics. I don't know whether I can respond to the other ones. As for the conflict between the governor of Lagos State and Mr. Peter Obi. Mr. Peter Obi went to Baltimore, Johns Hopkins. I said president, well, maybe he will be president one of these days. Governor Sanwo-Olu, went to Harvard. When Governor Sanwo-Olu went to Harvard, he was talking about prosperity in Lagos. He was attracting investors. The same week, you had Peter Obi at Johns Hopkins. Both universities are very important. I was in Baltimore. I lived in Maryland for a year. So if you are in that axis, University of Maryland or the Maryland axis, Baltimore, Johns Hopkins, world class. Harvard, world class. So it was like what Governor Sanwo-Olu was saying at Harvard to a very distinguished audience, inviting the world, the intellectual community, investors, to come and invest in Nigeria in Lagos. Peter Obi went to Johns Hopkins and said Nigeria is a useless country, more or less. So that, I think, is the subtext of the conflict. But what are the two gentlemen talking about? Now, Mr. Peter Obi, he likes to talk about the economy. He also likes to talk about the leadership of the country. Forget about the fact that he was presidential candidate. And he knows the subject. He may have studied philosophy at University of Nigeria, Nsukka. But I keep telling people, he was my classmate in a program at the Said Business School, University of Oxford. He left the place, he went to Harvard, he went to other places. This is a man who has developed himself. And he is saying that, look, the business, that the knowledge that he has gathered in terms of further improvement, further education, shows that there are lessons that Nigeria can learn from other countries, be it Malaysia, Vietnam, or even Cambodia. And he was saying to his audience that, look, the problem we have in Nigeria is one of poverty, and it's also linked to leadership. I'm not sure that theoretically anybody can argue with him on that score. But, Governor Sanwo-Olu's point is that, well, he should not have gone there, to an international audience to talk like that. That after all, when he was governor, he didn't establish the moral right to talk about poverty. That he met poverty in Anambra State at 44%. He moved it to 57%. That he took Willie Obiano to bring it down significantly. And that, that perhaps, Mr. Peter Obi was talking theory and he doesn't understand the subject. Well, if it is a theory, I have clear evidence that he understands, the nitty-gritty of these comparisons, comparative economies. Having sat in the same room with him for a limited time, in a business school. But what do you expect Governor Sanwo-Olu to say? Governor Sanwo-Olu is looking for investors. He could not have gone to the US, to Harvard, to say, come and invest, we are doing well in Nigeria. And he raised another moral point, that politics apart, when you go outside Nigeria, don't go and demarket your country. So both of them are politicians. Whoever wants to look at it from that prism can do so. Finally, NASIMA and Manufacturers Association being concerned about the poverty level in Nigeria. World Bank says by 2027, poverty will have reached 56%, which means that all of us in this studio, will all of us be effectively below the poverty line. Even now, we are struggling. The other day, I was telling you about the pandemic of empty pockets. My pockets are still empty. I have expectations. And I told somebody that this week, I have to pay school fees. Okay? But it's more serious than that. And that's why NASIMA is protesting. That's why, Manufacturers Association of Nigeria is protesting. And this, again, validates the point being made by Mr. Peter Obi, that, look, leadership in Nigeria has to take concrete steps to address the issue of poverty, the suffering of the people. On this day live yesterday, I had Dr. Muda Yusuf, and he was saying, look, we have to look at infrastructure, we have to look at insecurity, all these things contribute. World Bank, IMF, we have quoted Georgieva, we have quoted the head of the fiscal department, we have quoted all the reports in the spring meeting, IMF, World Bank, all the recommendations that they made to Nigeria. What NASIMA and Manufacturers Association have been saying is not different from what World Bank and IMF this week have told Nigeria. So it's for the administration not to say, oh, these people are talking nonsense. They are talking from Johns Hopkins. They are talking from IMF, World Bank spring meetings. It's to look at those recommendations and to address them and to see how my pockets can
get some relief. Remember, I told you we're cashless now, so I'm not believing this, that your pockets are that empty. But the truth is that all of us have felt the impact of the erosion of disposable income from our pockets. That's a reality, and that's a reality that everybody has the freedom and liberty to speak on, no matter where they are in the world. I'll begin with the presidency's defense of democracy in Nigeria and the argument that in Nigeria we are not moving towards a one-party state and that democracy is thriving currently in Nigeria. Let's remember that democracy is a Greek concept, and the word democracy itself comes from two Greek words. That's demos, people, kratos, power. Power of the people, power to the people. Now, when you look at some of the happenings in Nigeria and Nigerian politics, you ask yourself, how much power do the people really have? It's a no-brainer when you go to Rivers State and you see a state that is currently governed by a non-elected official. There's currently no House of Assembly. You ask yourself, where is the people's power in that equation? You quickly go to Delta State, where we've seen the governor decamp with the entire structure of the state. And you ask yourself, where's the power of the people in that equation? Because the people voted for something, they chose something. But the power of the elite has usurped that from their hands, and now they are left with something that they didn't necessarily choose. So when we're speaking about democracy, I think it's important for us to be very critical of every area of it, because one of the bedrocks of democracy is competitiveness. Is the environment competitive for various political parties? It's not enough for us to say that, oh, there are several political parties in Nigeria, therefore democracy is thriving. No. Are those parties able to effectively conduct their activities without facing hindrances? What are some of those hindrances? You know, we've come to accept as a norm what we call federal might or the power of incumbency, but there's no such thing in a free and fair democracy. A free and fair democracy is supposed to give everybody the equal opportunity to be able to contest for power when the opportunity arises. When we speak of federal might, I think it's just a colorful way for us to talk about how when you are at the center, when you have power of the center, you have power of the resources, whether they be financial resources, whether it be state resources, and all of those things are supposed to be independent. All of those things are supposed to function in the interest of the state and not in the interest of the party that is in power. So when we check the temperature of democracy in Nigeria, it's not enough to say that, oh, the opposition is disorganized. That's a truth. The opposition is disorganized. However, we also have to look at it in a holistic framework and say, how conducive is the environment for opposition to be competitive and for opposition to be organized? And of course, the answer is not entirely so. All you have to do is look at the history of those who have, several of those, I won't say all, several of those who have decamped from the opposition to the ruling party over the years, and you see how some who have EFCC cases, their cases seem to just disappear into thin air once they join the party of the fold. I said it as a joke here once before, but I'll say it again. The case should not be that it's cold outside. When you're outside of the ruling party, it should not be cold. You should be able to conduct your activities as a vibrant opposition freely, without fear or favor. So again, we have a situation where the elites are serving their interests, as they will continue to do so. So democracy will not be fully realized until we have demos, people, kratos, power, the power of the people. Very quickly to Peter Obi and Sanwo-Olu, I personally have always held the view that it is possible for one to criticize the leadership of one's country without necessarily demarketing their country. Johns Hopkins University is a world-class forum where people are discussing academic concepts. This is where research is done. This is where brains and minds come together to see how we can prefer solutions. Ideas can come from those meetings and those institutions and those gatherings. So if we go there and we say, oh, we're going to hide our shame, we may not put ourselves in the best position where we're able to hear from some of those experienced and exposed economic minds, maybe those that worked in China or in Vietnam or in Indonesia and all those other cases that were brought about. I think it's important that we continue to encourage robust and a wholesome debate, whether it happens here on Nigerian soil or it happens abroad. Speaking on how we want Nigeria to move forward is not demarketing the country, and I think it's very important for us to be able to write that, to drive that point home. I also think it's important that when we're having these engagements, especially in the public forum, let's seek the superior argument. So, of course, the criticism from Governor Sanwo-Olu is more than welcome, but it would have been a lot more welcome if we could have had him criticize or engage Peter Obi on an intellectual level about the content of the speech, as opposed to, oh, you can't go out and demarket Nigeria and then tell him he didn't do well in his time. Let's start to engage, because again, this is a part of what we're calling a healthy and robust democracy. I do not attack you because you have a dissenting voice. I engage you because we all have something to learn from one another. In essence, that is what opposition is about. It's not about running the country down, it's not about seizing power, but it's about contributing alternative thoughts and philosophy that can move the country forward. Now, speaking of moving the country forward, what's welcome for me this morning is the 13-point plan from NASIMA. NASIMA and the organized private sector have come together and said, you know what, we're not going to lament, we're going to come up with ideas. We're going to put forward potential solutions, which is exactly what we need at the moment. One of my favorites was the continued advocacy for us to embrace the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement and to begin to implement it. I read the case study of Uganda yesterday under President Museveni, and President Museveni was documenting how when Uganda made homosexuality illegal in that country, President Joe Biden yanked them off the AGOA agreement. Now, the USA used to be the biggest market for Uganda for their export of coffee, which is one of the backbones of their economy. But he said, how did Uganda survive this? Uganda survived this by embracing the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, trading with their neighbors. And because of that, their growth forecast from the World Bank and the IMF this year is 6%, double that forecast of Nigeria, even with all of the global headwinds we are seeing with global trade wars and so forth. I give this as an example to say that we are not doing enough to take advantage of that Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement, and I hope that the powers that be will be able to listen to the message and some of the solutions being put forward by NASIMA, including economic stimulus. It's not just about cash transfers and handouts. It's about credit, microfinance. How can we inject more capital into the productive sector of this economy? Investing in agriculture and so forth. What can we do? Because this is no longer about handouts. It's no longer about cash transfers. We've done that in the past, and it did not produce the greatest of solutions. It's about how to stimulate the economy. Several ideas, and I'm sure we'll continue to speak more on some of these topics as the show progresses.